Survivor Outreach Services, wow, it's not a job, it's a call. It's a calling of love and caring and making sure you're taking care of your fellow family members, because truly we all become part of this family and care for one another. So it could be a lot of things that are needed by a family, or it could be a little bit. Whatever they're looking for, we are their resources to make sure that we're gathering together.
And my son was a typical young man. He loved the outdoors. He loved hunting, fishing. He played some sports when he was growing up. He graduated from Penn Trafford High School, went on to college, did a couple years at the University of Pittsburgh. Then he moved up north and he graduated from Edinburgh University. And he got his degree in organic chemistry. Again, growing up in western Pennsylvania, typical, he was had that hard-working work ethic, and he had the love of country, and very patriotic growing up. And part of that was he came from a military-type family. His maternal grandfather was in the Army in World War II, and he was wounded and had a Purple Heart. His paternal grandfather, my father, was in the Navy in World War II. Most of my uncles served in World War II. Had 8 cousins that joined the military and served in the military. And his brother was also in the military in the Navy. And digress a little bit, but we were at home I think it was April. It was warm, and we had a granddaughter for the weekend. And this Saturday morning, we were making breakfast, and we received a phone call. My son, my youngest son, Christopher, had been injured. The night before, he was walking back to his ship, and it was docked in Florida at the time, and it was raining, and the car didn't see him and had hit him. And he was in a coma in the hospital and really didn't know if he was going to live or not. So we got a phone call from his commanding officer, "You need to get down here right now. There's been an accident and we're not sure if he's going to survive." For years we said, well, that was the worst phone call a parent could receive. And then several years after that, I was home on a Friday. It was June 11th. I was home, had worked half a day, went home. It was warm, it was hot, and 3 soldiers showed up at the door. And we heard the words that, "We regret to inform you that your son," and they went on from there. It's always good to mention their names. When you mention their names, you know they won't be forgotten. By saying their name, it keeps their spirit, keeps them alive in your mind and also in your heart. So I'm also always grateful that we can do something like this. My son, growing up, growing up in the 80s, he listened to the headbanging music, the rock music. But one day in the 90s, 1994, he came and said that he was interested in joining the National Guard. And I was full-time in the National Guard. It was AGR, Active Guard and Reserve. And I had never approached him about it. I thought, well, if he was interested, he would say something. And one day he said something. So in 1994, he joined the Pennsylvania Army National Guard, 28th MP Company, the detachment out of Greensburg, PA. And he just loved it. He had that sense, if I don't do it, who's going to do it? And that just carried on through his military career. He was in approximately 16 years. He had already deployed several times. He had been to Egypt. He had been to Saudi Arabia. He deployed to Iraq in 2007. And in 2010, the deployment came up for Afghanistan. And he loved the Guard. Not only loved the Guard, he liked the people he served with. Those guys, they were all just like family. Not only they were soldiers together, they were friends. And so they deployed, went to Iraq, came back, deployed again, went to Afghanistan. Several months into the Afghanistan deployment, they went over in February. So 4 months later, March, April, May, June, 4 months later, there was an issue, and he was killed by a suicide bomber. He was in Zabul. He was part of a PRT, Provincial Reconstruction Team. And the Provincial Reconstruction Team, they would have engineers, they would have doctors, they would have nurses, and they would go around and they would have meetings with tribal leaders, politicians, and they would see what the people needed. What can we do for you? What can we do for your village? And as a member of the military police, he was attached to an infantry unit, Company C, 1st of the 110th Infantry, and ultimately they were attached to the 82nd Airborne Division. So on his left shoulder, he wore the patch for the 82nd Airborne. Things were rough over there, and we knew things were rough. They were in southeast Afghanistan, close to the border, and that was one of the roughest areas you could be in. And not far from their FOB, their forward operating base, there was a bazaar, Bullard Bazaar, and they dismounted patrolled mostly through this Bullard Bazaar. And the bazaar was maybe a mile long, and it was made up of wooden and mud buildings. Some were 2 stories, but most were 1 story, and they had the roll-up garage door in front. And this is where the Afghans bought things that they needed. And it was also a gathering place. This is where they gathered. This is where they talked to each other. This is where they socialized. But at the same time, there was a lot of contraband moving through the bazaar. And their job was to keep that down. And they would catch a lot of indirect fire coming through there. But it was usually something that they could avoid. Then on June 11th, 2010, they met up with some ANPs, Afghan National Police, and their job that day was to provide security for the ANPs as they picked up supplies. They were mostly looking for medical supplies. And most of the things that they did concerning giving the Afghan people things, they made it seem like it came from the Afghan government, and even though it was U.S., so they went down and they gathered this stuff up. The Afghan National Police were mounted. They had vehicles, whereas my son and his platoon were dismounted. They were on foot. And not sure exactly what happened. There's guys that were there that said, when you're ready, we'll tell you. I haven't asked. We just know that my son had the platoon that day, and he was talking to one of his fire team leaders, and the guys in the platoon did not know what they were discussing or why. But when they were together, there was a young boy. Not too much more I can say other than that. We were fortunate in a way that there was a photojournalist, Dan Skakel, who was embedded with my son and his unit while they were in Afghanistan. Dan was from the Harrisburg area, and he'd been to Afghanistan before, and this time he was with my son, and they became friends. Dan was not there when the incident happened. He had left 2 weeks before. And I say we were fortunate because Dan had a lot of photos of my son and the people in the platoon while they worked in Afghanistan. So there was a lot of combat type photos that Dan was able to send to us, and we do have those. After the incident, Dan Skakel did an interview for the Meadville paper, and it was called The Final Days. And in there he profiled my son and how they became friends and how they'd get up early in the morning and jump on the computer to try to get a good connection so that they could contact friends and family at home. Because once the signals got crowded, you would lose those signals. So, and they talked extensively. And one of the things that Dan brought out is when they were in the fob behind the wire, that they were just regular young men, how they would laugh, how they would joke. They would talk about their families back home. And my son was not married, but he did have a daughter, Mackenzie, who at the time was 12 years old. And he was always trying to make connections with her. But Dan also brought out the fact that how they joked and would get on each other when they were behind the wire. When they went outside the wire, he talked about how their training kicked in and how professional they were and how their heads were on a swivel at all times and how well they did their jobs. And we were grateful that we had that kind of third-party insight and got a lot of information from Dan on how they functioned over there. When this happens, you don't really talk to anyone. You're kind of sheltered. And the individual who helped us was Sergeant First Class Rick Batchy, and he came to us the next day, and then Survivor Outreach probably went through Rick to contact us because we didn't talk to anyone personally. Everything was handled through our casualty assistance officer.
That's what he was called.
You know, what cemetery you want to go to, what funeral home do you want to go to, and we were told really not to talk to anybody, because the newspapers would call, but we didn't have the whole story. The story changed as it went, but you're assigned a casualty assistance officer, and that's who handled everything. Now, when we actually made contact with Denise, I would think it would have been after the funeral, because I can't really remember talking to anybody before then. The casualty assistance officer just takes care of everything. He makes sure that all Bob's stuff came back. He made sure that we had everything that we were supposed to have.
After he brought the stuff, then I think that's where Denise came in. He was the one who returned all my son's stuff to our house.
Okay.
And then after that, that was kind of the end with our casualty assistance.
That was the end of his responsibilities, and then it was turned over. And I would think that Denise contacted us.
Okay. So she took over from there.
Yes.
And then what services did she provide to you?
She keeps in touch. She checks on us still to this day. It's been 10 years, but she checks on us, make sure we're okay, we're doing okay. And that we have a question, we would call her, she would get the answers for us, and that. She did, I think
She lets us know what's happening
lets us know when
in
there's
the area.
Or she wants us to be involved in something, and that she'll call us.
There are certain functions that are happening, and they're interested in honoring Gold Star families or something like that, and she'll call and say, or email or text, and say, "Hey, Jim and Chris, this is going on. Are you interested?" the Gary Sinise Foundation in Texas. We had our granddaughter got involved in that, the Snowball Express. And there are several other things that take place in the area that are for Gold Star families. And Denise coordinates all of that kind of thing for us.
After my son was killed, a friend of mine asked if she could have some clothes of my son's. So we gathered up his clothes from this containers that we had, and I gave them to her, and she made she made 3 bears, or memory bears. And she made one for me, she made one for my mother, and she made one for my granddaughter, Mackenzie. And we each have a bear. So we all had a bear. These are Bob's clothes. This is what he had when he came back. These were clothes that came back from Afghanistan. And these are his dog tags. This is kits for dog tags, and this was sent to us. And this here, we only have one of these dog tags, and the other one is on his casket that he was buried.
These were Bob's
cemetery.
dog tags that he had when he was killed.
Yes.
And they were returned to us. And as you know, there's 2 tags, and we have one, and the other one is with Bob.
Yes.
So the bear has the tags.
Yeah, because it's Bob.
Okay.
They sent us these. What they did is they did some kind of a memorial out in California, and they put their names on a monument out there. And what they did is they sent us 12 dog tags. So I have one, he had, and I have one on him. And I gave them to his granddaughter and to my mother. We passed a few of them. I still have some of them. But these all came from California to where the memorial was out in California somewhere. They sent them to all the soldiers. There was names that were put onto this monument. So,
Well, they've been very helpful, and I'm glad they're there. And it would be too much for us to digest everything, because there are people that there are football games dedicated to Gold Stars, and we've attended some of those. They have the high school game where 2 teams represented. On each team they had 11 gold. They were 11 fallen soldiers on each team. And instead of wearing, let's say their name is Smith on that jersey that day, they would have Fike on the back of their jersey. And when they would make a play, it would be Fike intercepted the ball, or in our case, he was a quarterback, and it was Fike to Jones, 11 yards. There are dinners that you get invited to, and it would really be difficult to sort it all out. So it's really good that you have Denise and others that can help us do that. Even the yearly get-together that we have, the last couple of years it's been 40 Indian Town Gap. Not this year because of the COVID, but you go out and they just have a really nice weekend planned. And it's really great, because that's how you get introduced to other Gold Star families, other people who are going through what you're going through, have gone through what you have gone through, other families that woke up one day and found 3 military people standing in their living room telling them, we regret to inform you that. And that's what's really so nice about it. And again, she does call and check. Even COVID, she call up and, hey, Jim, Chris, how you 2 doing? You both doing okay? And you can't even get through it because she'll call on my cell phone and, well, let me talk to Chris. She wants to definitely make sure that both of us are doing fine. It was great, and I'm going to tell you what I enjoyed even more was that it was young people doing it. The night before, we had a get-together with them. So we got to meet them. I got to meet the young man who was going to wear Bob's shirt. We got to talk to them. And these were young people that wanted to do this. And that just made me feel so great. It's like, this just isn't, some adult saying, hey, we're going to do this. These were young people saying, we're glad to do this. We're honored to do this. You have a 16, 17-year-old young man saying, I'm honored to wear your son's jersey. You can just imagine how that would make you feel. The get-together not only included the young people, but it included their parents. So we got to meet his parents as well. And we would sit and talk. During the dinner, you would sit with them. So they would ask you questions, you would ask them questions, and we told them the story of our son, so they were aware of that. As my son is buried at the National Cemetery of the Alleghenies, and kind of a side story, we're talking to these people, and the guy, he has since retired, but the guy was in charge of the Cemetery of the Alleghenies, was a neighbor of these people, and they knew him. It just kind of worked out that way. And we've kept in touch with them. Their son has since graduated from high school. He's going on to college, and so we've kept in touch with them.
When he played football, his name was Park. I gave him a picture of my son, our son, and I gave him dog tags. So he had the dog tags, and he had a picture, so he knew what he looked like, who he was playing for. So.
And he wore the stuff to school.
He wore the stuff to school.
And they sent us a photograph of these young men wearing these shirts with the tags, with the pictures, and they wore them to school. So it's just fantastic that they would do something like this. And there's a football game in Pennsylvania, Big 33. And the year after Bob was killed, there was a young man in the Big 33 game who wore his name on his helmet. And we did not get out there for that game, but they sent us pictures of the helmet. In fact, it was my son Bob and the other young soldier who was killed, Brian Hoover. Their helmets were together, and they had the names on the helmets. So we had it just makes us feel so good that it's young people, because sometimes young people, you think they're more concerned with themselves than others, and you find out it really is not that way. Yeah, I'm sure Parker will always remember when he played in that high school football game, and he represented a fallen soldier. So I'm sure he'll remember that. When my son and his platoon would go out on missions, they would carry American flags. That day, this is the flag that was used as a shroud to cover him until they could extract him from the battlefield. And I always say that this, I have it in the bag, but this flag is dirty, and it's Afghan dirt. And this flag is soiled with the blood of a fallen American soldier, and it's special to us. And we brought this picture because this is one of our favorite pictures. This was taken before he deployed to Afghanistan. It was taken while he deployed to Iraq. And we used this photo. We've had this picture put on shirts and sweatshirts, and again, only because it's one of our favorite pictures of him.
A friend of mine, her mother I gave her these clothes to her for her to give to her mother, and her mother went out and had these bears made as a memory bear so we can remember our son forever. And she made 3 of them for us. I gave one to his daughter, Mackenzie, and I gave one to my mother, and I have this one. And this is my bear. This lives in our bedroom.
And the dog tags.
And the dog tags are, there's one with this picture on, which we got from a company, some cemetery out in California that had a memorial, and they sent these out with all the dog for us to have. And this one here is the dog tag that he had when he was killed, and this is the only one, and the other one is placed with him at the cemeteries of the Alleghenies.